It didn't begin with a headline. It didn't begin with a scandal. It began with a son. Sitting in silence for too many years, Donnie Swaggart didn't grow up like most boys. He didn't have the freedom to make mistakes in private. He was raised on a stage, under lights, behind cameras, with the entire Christian world watching him. Because of who his father was, Jimmy Swaggart, America's preacher, the voice, the tears, the fire on TV screens that made sinners fall to their knees, and right beside him was Frances. Always composed, always calm, always behind the scenes, but never unaware. People saw Jimmy, but Frances, she saw everything, and Donnie, he saw them both. There were things he was never allowed to talk about, not in public, not even in private. Things his mother kept locked behind closed doors. Things she carried, and expected everyone else to carry too. Quietly, faithfully, because, in the Swaggart family, silence wasn't just a choice, it was a requirement. Frances Anderson married Jimmy in 1952. They were young, poor, full of faith, and determined to do something big for God. What started as a ministry in rural churches turned into an empire by the 1980s. Jimmy Swaggart Ministries was one of the most powerful evangelical platforms in the world. Millions watched him preach, millions gave, millions believed. Donnie remembers those years, the studio lights, the tours, the pressure. But what he remembers most is the control. His mother was never just the preacher's wife. She was the structure, the order, the reason the ship didn't sink. She answered the phones. She handled the staff. She watched everything. And if something looked like it might damage the image, she made it disappear. In 1988, everything cracked. The story hit the news like a grenade. Jimmy Swaggart had been caught not in sin, but in exposure, a sex scandal, photographic evidence, a preacher brought to his knees. He cried in front of the world. He said, "I have sinned." He begged for forgiveness, and Frances, she stood beside him. Stone-faced, silent, unshaken. She didn't cry, she didn't break, and she didn't leave. Instead, she protected the brand. Donnie was in his 30s when it happened, but even then, he knew what was expected. Keep going. Preach louder, smile wider, never mention what really happened. Never 3 years later. It happened again, another woman, another room, another storm, but still, no public rage, no emotional collapse. Not from Frances, because some people don't run from fire, they manage it, and Frances Swaggart, she knew how to survive a scandal. Donnie kept preaching, kept traveling, kept saying what people wanted to hear, but behind the sermons, he was wrestling with a truth too heavy to carry. He had seen what others didn't, he had heard what others wouldn't believe, and he had lived through what most followers never questioned. The silence in his home wasn't peaceful. It was controlled, and it came with rules set by his mother. There were moments, quiet ones, where Donnie almost said something. Moments where his heart screamed louder than his fear, but every time, he remembered her face, her eyes, her command. Don't talk about it. Not about the money, not about the private arguments, not about the things she forgave in public, but punished in private. Years passed, the ministry survived, the viewers returned, and Frances, she remained the same. Publicly strong, privately distant, deeply guarded, until now. When Donnie finally said what he was never allowed to say, not for revenge, not to destroy his mother's name, but because the weight had grown too heavy to keep inside. He spoke about what she knew, what she covered, what she kept hidden, not for a day, but for decades. And when he said it, you could hear the cost in his voice. This wasn't a man trying to attack his family. This was a man trying to breathe, trying to be free. People say the truth sets you free, but what they don't say is how much it costs you first. Donnie Swaggart knew exactly what would happen the moment he opened his mouth. He knew the backlash, the headlines, the pain it would bring his family, the shock it would send through decades of followers, but he did it anyway, because when you carry something long enough, you either bury it or you break. And Donnie, he was done burying. He spoke about the silence, not just the public silence, the TV appearances, the fake smiles, He spoke about the silence in their home, the kind of silence that hums beneath dinner plates, that stiffens shoulders in hallways, that keeps everyone pretending. Long after the pretending starts to hurt. Frances wasn't cruel. She was calculated. Everything had its place, everything had its version, and everything had to be protected. The ministry, the name, the legacy, especially the legacy. Donnie remembered asking her once, "Why didn't you ever speak? Why didn't you tell the truth?" Her answer wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. She looked at him and said, "Because they wouldn't understand. And they didn't need to." That was her rule. People didn't need the truth, they needed hope, they needed structure. They needed the illusion that everything was okay. Frances believed that protecting the people meant protecting the image, even if the cost was honesty, even if the cost was her own son. But Donnie didn't just grow up, he changed. He saw what the silence did to people too. Marriages, to minds, to hearts. He saw what it did to himself. All those years, being the loyal son, the preacher's boy, carrying a story that didn't belong to him, but affected every part of him. He wasn't angry. He was exhausted. Exhausted from smiling. Exhausted from pretending. Exhausted from watching his mother rewrite reality. One careful word at a time. He said it slowly, plainly. My mother kept things hidden. Not just from the world, but from me. There were things he wasn't told. Affairs that were explained away. Business decisions that excluded him. Secrets that were passed between his parents, but never spoken out loud. He didn't blame her, not fully. She thought she was doing the right thing, keeping the ministry together, keeping the family together, keeping the illusion alive. But he realized something she never did. You can't heal what you keep hidden. Donnie started opening up. Not in anger. Not on a stage, but in quiet places. A podcast interview, a closed church meeting, a private conversation with someone who had followed his family for years. Each time he told the story, he felt lighter and heavier, because the truth has a strange way of setting you free and cutting you open at the same time. People reacted fast. Some praised him, said, "It was time." Others called him a traitor. They said he was attacking the woman who raised him. But Donnie wasn't attacking her. He was trying to honor the truth, even if it made people uncomfortable. He said, "I loved her, I still do. But love without truth becomes worship. And I'm done worshiping silence." Frances never replied, not publicly, not through a press statement, not through the ministry. That was her way, controlled the narrative, by not responding to it. But those close to her said they saw something shift. She didn't talk about Donnie's words. She didn't mention the interviews, but her voice became softer, her presence quieter, as if maybe she knew the time of silence was finally over. The ministry went on. People kept watching. The broadcasts continued. The donations didn't stop, but behind the scenes, a shift had happened. A line had been crossed. A curtain pulled back. A family that once demanded perfection was finally admitting it was human. And in that admission, something beautiful happened. Donnie found peace, not the kind of peace you get from applause, not the kind that comes from vindication, but the kind of peace that sits in your chest and says, "You told the truth, you stood up, and you're still here." He began telling stories he never told before. How Frances once cancelled an entire meeting because she didn't like who was invited. How she rewrote public statements, line by line, to remove anything that sounded too emotional. How she trained her staff and her family to speak in acceptable tones. Donnie lived inside that world for 40 years, and the moment he stepped out, he saw how abnormal it really was. He said, "Control disguised as faith is still control." Not everything was dark. He talked about her strength, her discipline, her ability to protect her husband through storms that would have destroyed other marriages. He admitted, without her, the ministry would have collapsed. But he also said, sometimes, the things that hold it all together are the same things that stop it from healing. What Frances kept hidden was never just the scandals, it was the cost. The cost of pretending, the cost of surviving, the cost of silencing pain for the sake of the gospel. Donnie refused to pay it anymore. Now, when he preaches, there's something different in his voice, not louder, just clearer. He's not defending the brand anymore. He's not repeating what he was told to say. He's standing on his own story. And for the first time in his life, he's not echoing someone else's truth, he's speaking his own. Not everyone will accept it. Not everyone needs to, but for Donnie, it was never about acceptance. It was about freedom. Freedom from image. Freedom from silence. Freedom from the legacy he was expected to protect, even at the cost of himself. And maybe, just maybe, that's what Francis never understood. You can build something powerful. You can guard it with your life. You can protect it from storms and headlines and betrayal. But if you never let the truth in, it'll rot from the inside out. Donnie isn't bitter, he's just done being quiet. And what Francis kept hidden for decades, he finally said it, and now the silence is over.